Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Candice Lewis. I'm a freelance independent producer and consultant working at the intersection of the live events, digital media, and entertainment space. And I am delighted to be with you all this afternoon, guiding today's much needed and forward-thinking conversation on innovating the future of media and how we're thinking about workflows for tomorrow's audiences. And so I think we all know what we mean by workflow, but for the sake of grounding us in today's conversation, we're thinking of workflows as how an idea gets to the audience. And as technology is evolving, that process is being reimagined daily. The traditional idea that you have that goes through production, post-production, distribution to your streaming devices is very, very rapidly changing. And so while we'll be talking about a number of different practices and tools, metadata really is the connective tissue making all of this possible. So today's panelists really do sit at very different pressure points of this conversation. We'll be looking at it from a production standpoint, localization, technology, and strategic standpoint, so that we get an idea of how they're thinking about these workflows, what's next, what's working, maybe what isn't working, and some words of wisdom that you guys can take with you into your day-to-day. So with that, this is going to be our esteemed panel with me this afternoon, and I'm going to start with Stephanie, asking her to introduce herself, tell us her title, and a little bit about what she does and how she's connected to today's conversation. Stephanie.
Thank you, Candice. Stephanie Haycock. I am the founder of WonderWorks Consulting. We're a boutique services firm that provides project management and product services to kind of help you optimize your content workflows. I'm also an 18-year veteran of the Walt Disney Company, launching platforms as iTunes, Disney Now, and lastly, Disney Plus. So happy to be here today.
ErinRose.
Hi, I'm ErinRose Widner. I'm with Verizon Business. I focus on emerging and creative technologies, specifically within the media entertainment, sports, and technology space, and happy to be here.
Liz Guenther. I've been with Deluxe Media, I think this is my 13th year now, mostly in the localization and distribution space on the client service side of things. I'm also happy to be here ×3.
Okay, we're all happy to be here. Thanks, you guys. Okay, so let's kick into it. And ErinRose, I'm going to start with you. Let's go kind of wider picture first. How are you seeing content distribution changing and content creation and distribution?
It's a big question because I think we can all say that it has absolutely changed in the last 10 years. Even just since the pandemic, it's changed tremendously, which has really affected content that's being created and consumed, and that's affected our traditional work streams and our traditional platforms, right? So you look at the broadcast space, that's been impacted. You look at VOD, that's been impacted. But I will say that I think, I was at IBC a few weeks ago. I don't know, was anybody else at IBC? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, love it. And I did feel like, I know we're in this different era of content and distribution and creation and all of that. But I did feel like there was this optimism this year at IBC where it was like, we have new tools. We're in a new era. We're in a new era of creation and distribution, but we're excited about it, and let's see what happens. And so I think we're all kind of coming to that, and we're also seeing AI come into fruition with how that's affecting everything as well.
Liz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Yes. give it a beat. I think with that, right, sort of where I'm at in the pressure point of that end-to-end pipeline, the ability to flex to meet that demand, to just get to the audience quicker, faster, while maintaining that quality. The tools to do that are a little bit more accepted nowadays, which is quite exciting to see. So we can have real honest dialogues about timelines to get there with things like AI, what it can do to the budget as well, which it just creates opportunity, I think, for our distributors and content creators out there. So you're not walking into a room wondering, what's the taboo word anymore? Is the lawyer here? Am I allowed to say certain things, right? You can sit down and kind of go, hey, your traditional workflow took 45 days. You want to do it in 28. This is how we're going to get there. These are the pilot programs we'll put into place so that we can maintain the quality so your audience doesn't have any degradation of experience and things like that. I didn't go to IBC, but I can say on my side, I'm hearing very similar dialogues, which is great to see.
Yeah. And Liz, I want to stick with you for a second. Based on your background and the deep experience you have at Deluxe on the localization side, what is the backbone that allows for workflow innovation for you?
Yeah, so for me, what I've really seen is more dialogue from the content creators to the distributors, and really understanding in the pipeline what upstream helps downstream, right? We want to give those content creators as much time as we can to make the best product out there for the audience. And that just means, on that tail end, we're getting pinched a little bit more in terms of timeline for localization and distribution. And I think coming to them up front and talking about things like K&P for marketing and making sure that the audience recognizes from start to finish a consistent product, right? So looking at them and saying, hey, what's your content about? What's your key names and phrases? Is red a character, or is it a place? What is it? How do you want to market it? Let's maintain that across the space. For me, we've kind of expanded beyond just an Excel spreadsheet to share that information from marketing or content creators to the downstream deliverables to make sure that you have consistency and chain of custody in that pipeline. So now to develop tools to maintain something as simple as a K&P is pretty great. And I think when you look at the metadata, which I know you talked about, the connective tissue, having that space where the content creators have influence over it and can tell us this is what it is. So we know that ultimate output going out is accurate and going to be the quality that the content creator really expects in the final deliverable. So, yeah.
And I was just going to say, I think, so I was in localization space many, many years ago, but we also did a lot of glossary work. We did a lot of terminology to make sure. But I think what's so interesting about where you're at right now and where we're at with media is that all of the content that you're producing is also affecting all of like the social media content, and so much more content that you're even touching, but you are influencing, but you are like the start of that consistency. So it's like really fascinating to see how that kind of trickles down.
Yeah, I think even to expand upon that, we're seeing so many crossovers or universes, right? The IP is changing hands, right? You can look at something legacy like the Muppets and seeing how many different owners it's gone through, right? And you want to maintain that consistency so your audience globally recognizes it, no matter if it's in a toy, on a new platform, an SVOD stream, whatever it might be, right? It's got to have a recognizable space. And I think that starts with something like that. So.
And did you want to expand a bit on term-based in terms of talking about workflow innovation?
Yeah, so Deluxe developed term-based. That's the tool I was mentioning, right?
Yeah.
Where that's just the tool for us to get out of Excel spreadsheets, right? And it has a space where for K&P tools, your creative supervisors can go in, review them, have influence over it. Your, like I said, your content creators can go in and make sure that they are signing off on it, or if they need to change it and influence it. But it's creating consistency and helping that quality check at the tail end of things, which is really great. So you can go through and know it's been signed off. It's going to kind of keep that nice chain of custody through its pipeline from creation to QA steps, ultimately to the different deliverable platforms out there, which there are many. So.
Yeah, great. And so, Stephanie, we want to get you involved here. So based on your background and from your perspective, what is the backbone that allows for workflow innovation for you?
What we saw at Disney going back almost 10 years ago was metadata. Metadata really drives automation. It enables personalization. It ensures regulatory compliance. That was a big thing for us because we had so much kids content. But ultimately, it unlocks monetization. And that's a huge driver right now, right? So when we took over our digital supply chain and we started delivering out to about 65 platforms and 300 endpoints on a daily basis, we started to see a huge drift. What was coming back in wasn't what we had actually put out. And so we needed to stop and take a look at processes, go back to green light, and really focus on a locked taxonomy that every stakeholder, internally as well as externally, understood the value of all the data points. And once we had that, then we could ensure that that was going to be a complete chain. We were the authoritative source of our own data, and no one was going to change it externally because we took their considerations into account as we built our new structure. That created a metadata strategy that is in play today. If you look at the YouTube presence for Disney Channel, that mindset came from that initial project and stuck with that team. They talk about it in summits like this on a regular basis about how their tagging strategies and SEOs, all of that came from, they understood the value of metadata into their supply chain.
And I want to pivot more into, I'd rather go deeper into metadata, but from Liz's perspective, how is this changing the way content is organized and distributed?
So I think with that, I touched on it a little bit, right, is you're going to see more accurate content go out, right? It's going to help improve the pipeline from the creation space, and it follows it through to the QA space, which is really great to see, right? Because ultimately, whatever that story is that's trying to reach that global platform, we want it to maintain consistency from start to finish. So for us to have that trust in a system, right? Because there's this cute little sexy MD5 file that follows this metadata package through, right? You know that there's this magic happening on the back end, that you're not going to ultimately put out something for a region or a territory or an age group that's not appropriate for them, right? You're going to trust those edits or compliance there. In the localization space, right, we're going to end up working with hundreds, if not thousands, of files on one of those, large-scale episodic type programs for the different regions, and those have to go to the right distributors. They have to sort of have a proper accountability from creation to QC steps, right? So for us, I think it's just improving the process and making it more trustworthy. And upon that, right, you're going to see that improvement in timing, budgets, accountability, right, for the process going through.
I think the formatting thing is interesting, right? Because you can have one film and there could be 50 cuts of it, right? Depending on where it's going. It's going to like an airplane, it's going to another country, it's going to whatever the parameters are, the aspect ratio, the frame, like all of this stuff. And so that's where I think it gets really interesting, where you want to make sure your metadata is super clean. Like all of that is really well done.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm on the client service side, so I might look at it from just a large scale size of, a title with a localization component with certain video profiles going through, and then I've got, my distributor list. There's magic behind the scenes. Like, how do I trust, right, when I order this French file to go to this distributor, in Canal Plus or whatever, it's there. And that's the back end side of things that I'm so grateful for, that I can trust it goes through, so that I can kind of see that and know I'm not going to have an email go through my inbox at 3 a.m. that was not the French file, that was LAS, or it wasn't to the right speed, and so it's not playing for the audience,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And that's
Stephanie?
why what we did was really push that by taking it further in that life cycle to the beginning stages and having your programming teams identify all of those various delivery points that they want this content to go to sooner rather than later, and creating those containers, managing those expectations months in advance of it going out gives external teams, internal teams time to prepare. And that is essential to being successful.
And Stephanie, can I stick with you for a second? How are you thinking about this from a rights perspective?
Yeah, so for streaming, we really leaned into movie labs and their specifications, using ITER as kind of that central point, right, for being able to uniquely identify all of the various components and the versions and where they needed to go. And then what that afforded was the avail, right? So managing the rights, that was part of my portfolio, taking that down, creating language holdback features where the title could go out, but maybe one of the languages wasn't ready, so it would get held back and it would sunrise as soon as it became available. All of that allowed us to go from 8 languages on launch to over 25 within a year, and from 4 territories to over 106. So the the key takeaway, I think, is that through metadata, really lean into those standards, because those standards give you that ability to scale at mass and to do it quickly without too much pushback, because the whole industry has agreed to that framework, right? It's not perfect, but you can work with the imperfections.
And ErinRose, I'm going to go to you. What are the challenges you see in making these practices kind of scalable across teams or systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing we're at this, not infancy, because obviously we've been doing this for like 10, 15 years, but we are getting to this point where I think it's just so critical. And so it is embracing those standards, but then also looking at how do you really take those through into new types of media as well, and make sure that they're in place, that they can be aggregated in a way that doesn't require a lot of manual manpower. And so I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So when you can embrace those standards, then it really will help.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into personalization a bit. So how do you see metadata shaping personalization and audience experience in the future? And I know you have a really big thought on this around social media.
So I just came off of IBC, and so I was part of the accelerator program there. And our big project that we've been doing for like the last 2 years has been around personalization of media. So creating personalized highlight reels for sports content. And so we really looked at how do you create something where I like this team, I like this player, I like all of these different elements within that, within sports. We did sports as our focus. But the thing is that when you're looking at rights, and we were doing this project, we had to use content that didn't have as much metadata. And so that was really interesting, because your output is actually only as good as the metadata you have available for your content. And so we ended up having to create a ton of metadata to personalize that experience, to make that relevant, to make that feel like it was incredibly different and unique to you. So I will say that metadata is so key as we go into the future. You're hearing about so many different types of personalization right now. And the key to that is going to be your metadata. And so that's where I think, it's going to be sliced and diced in different ways, and it's only going to be as good as the metadata.
Okay, so let's pivot to AI, because I know that's sort of everywhere at the moment. How are AI and automation impacting day-to-day workflows for each of you? And are they speeding things up, creating new risks, both? Let's riff on that for a while. You want to start, Liz?
Yeah, so I think, in my experience, I've seen AI sort of at two touch points, right? Which is the localization creation space, which is sort of sitting in this AI assist. We don't want to fully take the human element out of it right now. So I think we are doing a lot of post-edit steps and kind of trusting that process at the moment, which just, again, improves our timeline. It has to be built upon, right? Our QA team might come in and go, this is not conversational at all. The tone is completely wrong. But the tool, right, needs that input to just grow over time and space. So that's really great to see kind of come through for certain languages, right? We have to kind of prioritize through it. The other space we're seeing AI, to kind of go back into the standardization, right, is in the QC space and setting up profiles and those sort of technical objective elements of a file so that it can come through and just be run through a tool and come out and let you guys know, if the levels are set, if the sync is done well, does the file, hit the right color space and things of that nature. So you're taking out maybe bottlenecking where humans may have had to come through and do a spot check of the file, maybe even spot checking the metadata itself, which seems redundant, but to have sort of two touch spaces where we can improve that pipeline with something like AI is just going to make the budgets better, going to make the timelines better for these elements to go through. There's certain things, right? I know AI in the localization space right now is very much going to still have a little bit of a human touch point for the next couple years, but to see it sort of expand for large-scale global release projects, especially as rights do change hands, and we have a distributor who needs this deal out very quickly to get it to go through and sort of objectively do conformance groups and QA steps and just sort of get through and make that file whatever that distributor needs is as fast as possible is really great to see and know that the quality is going to be maintained.
Yeah,
But it also like enables larger audiences too, right? And so like maybe, there are like these different tiers that are leveraging AI in different ways for localization or that content. But like that also kind of democratizes a bit like the content that's also being created right now, where like maybe we can afford this, but now we've reached a global audience that we would not have been able to reach like 3 years ago. But yeah, I think, the human touch is absolutely something like for us at NAB, we showcased a demo which leveraged an NVIDIA tech stack, which identified different frames for a broadcast, which basically we're saying, okay, let's say that you have 16 camera feeds coming in and you want to make sure that you are zeroed in on we did a horse race. So we showed a horse race and we wanted to make sure that we were zeroed in on a jockey to help like the technical director create that final cut. And so we were able to leverage AI to help identify those different shots. But it was still, the technical director was still there. So we still are very much at this place where you do need that human element to make those final calls or do that final QA or whatever it is. We're not completely there yet.
yeah. And do you touch AI at all in your work, Stephanie?
I do have conversations with clients right now. We're working on some efforts to really kind of innovate supply chain workflow, like across teams, where lots of silos exist, and how you can use AI to actually make those day-to-day workflows and the support of a platform more efficient. So not just the end output that the consumer is going to see, be good to your people and figure out how you can use it to make their lives better, because there's lots of ways, and it's not sexy, don't get me wrong. It's not what the executive staff is necessarily going to want to hear, but people shouldn't have to be triaging across 6 different knowledge repositories and 5 different trackers and all of this stuff. One platform, AI on the back end, that's collating all of this to make their lives easier, makes happy people.
Okay, Liz, so we're going to go to you. I know you've been talking about some of the new workflows you're implementing, but how do you get buy-in across teams and clients who may resist that change?
Yeah, I mean, at our space, right, as a vendor, we can only go as fast as our clients are comfortable with introducing AI in any of those spaces. And it's a typical sort of, trust and prove the theory space, right? And so for us, right, we can build what we think they might need out there based on conversations with them, but ultimately they need to sign off, right? We need to see the stress test over it, if it's quality, the timelines of it, right? And then if we overpromise, that's a fail point, right? So we have to make sure with them that we are reassuring them from a creative creation space, right, as well as the ultimate deliverable that's going to go out from the technical side of things, and making sure that the complexity that they're expecting is still being delivered. So I think it's just a conversation, it's communication, it's regular checkpoints, it's setting reasonable milestones, and with that, figuring out ultimately what they're comfortable with, right? So from there, if we can say, let's start with AI in the localization space with your text-based materials. Metadata is a great example. Subtitles, we get through that, we prove the model, and then we can step into things like audio description or dubbing, sort of that more complex side of the industry. We have to prove it, right? We kind of have to put our money where our mouth is and just go at a pace that they're comfortable with.
ErinRose, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I can't remember what the original question was.
Oh, yeah, it's how you're getting the buy-in for your teams and your clients.
Well, I think that is that is part of the human element, right?
Yeah.
So I think absolutely, I love the way that you framed it, which is that we're asking the customer to validate it. We're asking the customer to feel comfortable with it. And you're never going to push anything on anyone who's not comfortable with it. But when you can prove it out, and I think, what we did at NAB over private 5G with that tech stack absolutely brought people in where they were like, oh, I've actually never seen this in action. That's actually very, very cool. And so if you can prove it out, then you can show that use case. And then I think customers are on board.
And did you have anything to add, Stephanie? No? Okay. So I know we don't like to talk about failure, but can you each share an example of when innovation failed, really, and what you learned for it? Stephanie, do you want to start?
Yeah, mine is an AI example that actually goes back about 10 years ago. We brought in and started a new R&D team in our cable technology, and they were trying to build the first kind of generative descriptive metadata tool. You'd feed the video through the engine would produce synopsis, it would identify talent, and could do some basic tagging. In a sandbox environment with specific scenarios, beautiful. You deploy it the minute you put it through, the next type of content that wasn't identified in the sandbox, it failed. And so it continued in a cycle, but the downside to that is the trust, right? So you put it in front of the business too many times, when it's failed, you start to have a trust problem. And I think that happened maybe one too many times. So that curve became almost a 10-year curve. Fast forward to 2023, and now newer technology, much more solid. You can get it out there quicker with your iterations, and it's live in production today. But, should that have been such a long tail? There's so many factors that go into it. It's timing with the market, it's timing with the technology, it's timing with just general business and opinions about it. I think to the point ErinRose made about IBC, we're a little more excited about it in comparison to the past 2 years where it's been, a naughty word.
Yeah.
I think people are proving it. And also I would say, like we talked about this, but like that project took 10 years, but like what would that take now with the tools that are available? So it really is about the tools. And
Absolutely.
I'll say, like, for me, instead of saying a failure, I'll say a happy accident.
Okay.
Is that, last year we were looking at, with the personalization project that I was working on, we were looking at how do you create personalized commentary for personalized highlight reels for media content. And so we were in between, we were using OpenAI at the time. And so we were looking at that, and it changed models halfway through the project, as it does, as our technology is evolving. And so we had to look at it, and we were able to do that commentary, but what it turned out to be, which we felt it was more authentic, was more audio description. So we were like, okay, it's not perfect commentary, but it is audio description. And how great is this that we now have an accessibility element that we had always planned to have in it, but this audio description is also like the start of commentary. And so that, I think, was a bit of like a failure / like, oh, this is a nice discovery for us, And so, but I think it's because technology is evolving so quickly that you are really having to test and try and repeat, and then add something else into the mix to see whether or not it elevates the project or shapes in a different way that you weren't expecting, which is also very cool. Liz?
Yeah, I think I can share an example of in the end-to-end pipeline, right? We were looking to make an improvement, and we didn't have all the necessary stakeholders in the room. So we were asked to develop something sort of with a security focus, right? So we developed a tool for distribution of pre-production assets with the security team. And we met all of their standards, two-factor authentication, download receipts, all of that great stuff. And, launched it out to their global partners. And they just sent complaints to the operation rep. And the operations rep was like, why would you deploy this without me in the room? This is my job. I have this. I could have come in and told you. They don't want to log in with this information. They're kind of rooted in their old ways, or their systems only allow for so much bandwidth. They've got people on staff in their IO department to download things this way, and that's their sole touch point. It doesn't need to go from there to the editor afterwards, and how would the editor get it with this, key system? So for us, I think it was kind of realizing that conversation, right? You have to also look around the room and ask that question of, should anybody else be in here? And if you have an instinct that maybe we're missing somebody, like in an operations department who literally does that job, you should invite them to the conversation before it's released.
Right. Like you're solving a problem that like you don't have all the information for, which is
Yes.
like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, your shareholders have to all be at the table.
Yeah. Okay, I want to pivot a bit and talk about collaboration between the creative and technical teams. How do you see that evolving over the next few years? ErinRose,
I'll start. I mean, I think it's just so interesting. Like, I know, again, like I think we are starting to come off of the AI, obviously AI is impacting a huge change in the industry, and it's impacting roles, and it's doing all of that. However, it is also opening creativity. And I think a lot about, when YouTube first started and how people were very worried that it was going to take away some of that creativity, and maybe that content is different than that produced studio work, but it's still this outlet for creativity. But with that technical element, I mean, you go back to pen and paper, you go back to how content was created years and years ago, and then you bring in that computer animation, you bring in all of that. And so creativity evolves with technology, and so I think we're at a very exciting time to see what happens.
Yeah, Liz?
Yeah, for me, I think on the creative side of things, I'm really excited to see where AI can assist the budget and where that budget can then get reallocated. Yeah. So I think right now, we're in a space when we talk about AI and localization and distribution, we're talking about some of the mainstays, sort of our global platform, that footprint, that built-in audience that we've had over decades and decades of distribution. Where I'm really excited to see things grow is sort of with those niche languages, like indigenous languages that we have here, I think it'll be really cool for studios to be able to look at and go, hey, I finally have that budget for a Lakota dub. Let's sit down and price that out. And when that gets to enter that picture again, and metadata gets to come in and sort of do what it's just done for the last decade for sort of those standard languages, you're going to see languages that need to be preserved and really come from this wholesome, great space, have an audience again and get to be maintained and have that historical value with them. So, yeah.
Yeah. No?
I think for me, it's in the metadata and the kind of workflow space, AI is really going to allow people to hone in their strategic skills, right? Your job is going to be less about the minutia of the data and authoring 10 different versions of a synopsis because this platform needs 150 versus this one needs 165. It's going to allow you to really figure out how you can optimize and get that higher audience mark.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay, so we're going to go to audience questions in a second, but I do want to pick your brain about something. What's one prediction you'd make about media workflows in the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean,
ErinRose?
metadata is going to be key. Yeah. It is, because I think when you think about that future of media being everywhere, and I'm talking about streaming, I'm talking about different platforms, I'm talking about all of it. When you think about even just, the Ray-Bans, that is media. It's still media, right? And discovering anything in the world is going to require that metadata to be accurate, and that is what is going to get your content across the line and find new ways of creating that ROI, which everybody is so keen to do. There's so much content right now. We know this, right? We know that the Olympics alone had 7,000 hours of broadcast content. So when you think about that, there's no way that anyone humanly can digest that, right?
Yeah.
But someone still created that content, and they're still looking for ways to monetize that content. And so when you implement the right metadata on top of that, then you have different ways of repurposing that, whatever the platform is going to be.
Yeah. Liz?
I touched on it just a minute ago, but I think something similar that we're going to see with sort of emerging technologies and AI, is as the openness and the willingness to look at text to speech is going to develop, I think we're going to see more audio descriptive languages go out for the world right now, right? I think that budget and sort of, I think those regional teams are going to understand that there's an audience there that they can reach. And I'm really excited to see AI kind of help support that in terms of budgeting and build that library up.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see it really open up the door of interoperability. It's going to allow you to deliver and scale, right, in ways that you, as maybe a small provider, have never been able to even think about, because the engines are going to be able to do a lot of that for you.
Yeah. Well, we're going to turn over to the audience. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists today? Yes. Hi.
Thank you. So metadata in streaming video. What would you tag? Let's say there is an event, either a very large event with lots of cameras, or there is a small event, small league. What would you tag? Would you do object detection? Do you do like pose detection? And how much of a value is it to have your object detection at the edge versus like right there at the camera versus like have it in the cloud?
Well, I would go back before even you think about the video itself, right? And so the metadata is not only going to be focused on that video, but I need the metadata for every player that's playing. I need the metadata of where they come from, how many wins, losses, how many everything. And so you think about that from just like their entire career. So if you have a player and how many, like let's say that there are 40 players in this one game, what you're outputting is only as good as how much metadata you have for that whole historical context plus the video. So yes, you can think about everything that's happening live, and you can think about processing it on the edge versus, in the cloud. But you do want to think about that metadata is a very comprehensive world, and it's not just what's happening right there in the moment. It's actually the stuff that's happened before that is going to help drive that personalization and that content experience now.
Anyone? Yes. Yeah.
So I think this is for you again, just to follow on that path. You mentioned that your POC at IBC included a horse racing, right?
The one at NAB, yes.
Okay, yeah, NAB. How did you guys go about it? I guess just is this sort of going through the entire library of sports metadata and recreating that should be quite intensive.
It is. So I think, so I'll actually answer it with like the horse racing was one specific thing around identification of different shots. The thing that we did at IBC was more around that metadata for a specific team and specific players. So again, that was a team that really actually was the British Forces Broadcasting Service. They didn't have a ton of metadata that was available, like if you're looking at like a FIFA or something like that. You can actually get a ton of content, right, from something that's more well-established. So again, it's just as good as your metadata is.
Yeah, I guess the part that I'm more interested in, sort of like, is there any initiative internally or externally that you're sort of pursuing? How do you go about finding new talent or the technology? Is it internal or how do you find all these data scientists and to work on something?
And I think that was the thing that was interesting for BFBS is that they were like, we hadn't created all of this metadata, and so I think now. And that is kind of the message in terms of this panel. This is the message in terms of the project that we did, is that if you are going to be a content creator, it is imperative that you have such amazing metadata, right? Or else you are not going to be able to have this ROI, these different, platforms to showcase your content on. And so that is where I go back to the content creator. That's not my responsibility as a technology provider. I'm an enabler, but the content provider, if you're looking to create that ROI based on your content, you have to look at your content.
Dynamic CMS is your friend. We've built many over the years, but they have to be flexible. The business is changing so quickly, you've got to be able to adapt to that and add in new features of metadata. Sometimes a new platform comes up, right? And they've introduced something that's part of their audience experience that you weren't tracking before. You need to not only be able to add that field into your CMS within hours, but populate it. And that's where AI, I think, is really going to innovate and help you scale in the future. To do that is explaining to the engine what's the difference to the next field over that this field is. More than likely, it's not going to be terribly different. It might even be an amalgamation of two already existing fields, right? Like think of themes is really deeper genres, right? And so whatever technology you're using, there's many tools out there. You want to find something that's going to work and scale for you.
Are you creating these things on your own or outsourcing these workflow like tools? Are you building them on your own internally at your companies or outsourcing them to third party vendors too?
I mean, the project that I did that I talk about with IBC was a group of companies, right? And so it was a group of companies working together.
Like which companies, like 12 labs?
Yeah, so the companies that were involved, and you can go to the IBC website and you can look at everybody that we were involved with, but it was AMD, Zanzer Media, British Forces Broadcast Service, Chiron. You're putting me on the spot, so I'm going to probably forget quite a few of them.
You mentioned a lot.
Spectral Compute, but you can go to the website and you can see everybody that was involved in the project.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Are there any other questions? No. Okay, well, let me kind of give you guys, we want to leave you with a little thought leadership piece here. If you could give the audience today one practical step to prepare for the future, what would it be? Liz?
Well, it's funny, I don't mean to echo, but that was sort of my prep as well, was to think from the content provider, the content creator side of things, right, is really developing their K&Ps up front, right, really thinking of what their end target is and just making sure that's housed in a safe space, right, so that it can basically stay consistent as it changes hands over time, and really just trusting the partner that you have to house that to stay in business.
Yeah, that helps, yeah. ErinRose?
I would say I'll just kind of build on what I said before, but it is still a metadata is key, and just to anticipate any kind of platform. Sora has just announced this new content creator social media platform. Yeah. So there's going to be something popping up every few months for the next few years, and so how do you want your content to be integrated into these different platforms and to really get traction, but also realize that ROI.
I'll lean into a little bit of what Liz was talking about. I would say if you're struggling with what you're getting back is not matching, right, what you've got in your supply chain, you need to pause and really dig deep. Look at each individual field and find out throughout that chain where things are changing, because you're not going to be able to truly optimize your revenues in the long run if things are changing and drifting too far away from center, right? Your teams can't, your sales teams are like, what am I looking at? Your advertisers, things aren't matching what sales says they're supposed to match. And so that causes such a rift.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, I think we're going to wrap this afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. I think we got some real insight that we can take away with us on how to think about workflows for tomorrow's audience. Happy rest of the conference. Thank you.